Hi everybody, and thanks for viewing this YouTube fly tying tutorial of the Partridge and Orange. This has long been considered one of my favorite flies to fish, in that you can fish it as a nymph, as a wet fly, as a dropper. I really love to fish it in a film as an emerger, and finally it can be fished as a dry fly. It's got really just a few patterns, they're relatively simple to tie, and most importantly, they really seem to catch fish, as I'm sure if you talk to a few of your friends that have fished this in the past, they can attest as well as me. Well, for starters, I would like to really point out that I've already tied this fly on YouTube, and I'll put a link on this video right now. But the one that I tied originally was another variation of this pattern. And the one that you'll be seeing today, again, it's another variation. There's lots of variations out there. They vary in color, the size of the ribbing, the hackle used at the front, and whether or not there's even dubbing and what that dubbing might be directly behind that hackle. So if you do a quick Google search, you'll come up with just a million looking partridge and oranges. And I'm not going to recommend one over the other, though I will recommend this one that I'm tying today. The pattern that I'm tying today came to be for a number of reasons. For starters, I really like to chat at times on those Pennsylvania fly fishing forums, and you can really get some great discussion going back and forth regarding fly tying. But occasionally there's a swap, and I chose to participate in a recent nymph/wet fly swap, and I really wanted to share this pattern with some of the other tiers out there. So I looked at this pattern, I looked at a few of the ways that I've tied it in the last few years, and started to pull out some characteristics that I felt were just a little more crucial to the overall pattern, hence why I'll be tying it this way today. So this video is meant to share this pattern with all of you, also to share with those tiers that I'm doing the swap so they have an idea of how it's tied, and also to point out a few other techniques and tips that you'll be able to pick up throughout the tying of this. I will point out that I'm tying this pattern today on a Gaelic Supreme hook. This is their Sil Nemes, basically Sylvester Nemes, raised eye, soft hackle, wet fly hook. This is a really cool hook. The company is owned by a buddy of mine that I ran into at some bamboo rod gatherings, because I'm a bamboo rod builder and so is he. And he was telling me about some of his hooks, and he showed me this one. His name's Graham, by the way. Hello, Graham. And what's neat about this hook is, first of all, it's got that up eye that really just screams tradition and class whenever you're talking wet flies. But also the hook is just a little bit heavier, so it's not that fine wire hook that you've come to expect from a lot of soft hackle patterns. I like this hook a little bit heavier because you know that it's going to penetrate through the film of the water if you need it to get down there. So if you have a chance to pick up some of these hooks, please do. I'll be tying this on a size 16 today, though I'll fish this anywhere between sizes 14 to 20. In fact, I want to say the size that I may have sent through the swap was a size 17. Graham has all kinds of great sizes for these hooks that he carries. So if you have a chance, check out those Gaelic Supreme hooks as well. Well, with all that said, let me get tying into this Partridge and Orange fly, and if you have any questions throughout the way, don't be afraid to leave them down in the comment section, and I will get back to you with those. So the first thing I'll do right now is show you a finished look at the fly, and then I'll list the materials. Finally, I'll tie this pattern for you. Alright, let's get started on this Partridge and Orange. You can see this hook in my vise. It has a really nice, almost like a miniature salmon fly look to it. Great looking bend, heavy wire or heavier wire, and that up eye. Here's the packaging. If you do have a chance to purchase these, make sure whenever you contact Gaelic Supreme, you tell Graham that I said hello. For starters, I'm going to be using some orange silk thread. This is Clover brand. It's a 100 meter spool, and the size is pound 50. I don't know exactly what that conversion is, but I can tell you it's a heavier thread. So keep that in mind if you use this silk or whatever silk you're going to be using. There are many thin and thick silks out there, so you just got to figure out which one's going to best fit your application. I'm going to wrap that back approximately 2/3 from the hook eye. Then I'm going to tie in my ribbing, which is a fine silver wire. Whenever I tied this fly previously for YouTube, I was using a silver wire, but it was an oval rib. And it was a little bit thicker, which was really nice in that it provided a little bit more shine whenever the fly was in the water. But I chose to use a thin wire for this pattern because it gives it just a subtle shine and it looks a little more traditional. Once I have that tied in, I'm just going to wrap back to where the barb would be since I debarbed it. And then I'm going to make turns with my silk thread back forward. I want to make very consistent and firm turns, and I want to make sure each turn is directly touching the one that was previously made. With silk thread, it's very easy to have an overwrap, and it can be easily seen by the eye. Once I get up near the eye of this hook, I'm then just going to wrap back because I want to build a slight taper in the thorax. Once I've created that thorax, then I'm going to be wrapping my wire forward. And there's my taper. For the wire, I want to ensure that I have some even spacing. As it comes forward, you can see it has a real nice look to it. Just will provide that subtle shine that I was talking about. When I get near the eye, I'm just going to make 2 turns with my silk. And that's it. The silk is going to be getting out of there right now. It's going to be saying goodbye. And in its place, I'm going to be adding some 8/0 tan thread. I have this on my Stonfo bobbin. Looks like I need a little bit more tan thread pretty soon. And the reason I'm getting rid of the orange in this case is because I don't want to build up the head of the fly too much. That is very easy to do. So what I'm going to simply do is just wrap over all these materials with my tan thread. Make sure that I have everything locked in place. And once I'm sure of that, I can just cut everything away one at a time. For the wire, we can just helicopter that stuff away. Okay, I'm going to wrap back just a little bit because I do like to build up the thorax. For the thorax, I'm going to be using some Delaware River Club Pale Yellow. It's a nice color that, when wet, represents the mayfly's sulphur and light cahill really well. Whenever I dub this on, I don't want a real tight dubbing loop. You can put it on relatively loose. It's going to serve a couple functions. First of all, it's meant to be representational of those mayflies. And second of all, it's going to help to support the soft hackle fibers. And I'll talk a little bit more about that once I get to that point. So I'm just going to make some loose turns, build it up a little bit, and that is it. Look over my fly. You can see there's some fibers that are shooting out. If you want to grab a pair of hackle pliers, get those out of there, you can. I'm going to do that right now versus waiting. And then finally, we're going to add in Hungarian partridge. That's going to be our wing. It's going to be our hackle fibers. This is a nice piece of partridge. What I like about this piece is it has some nice modeling. It's also making that transition from that gray to brown color. There's some shorter fibers near the tip, longer near the base. To prep this feather, I'm going to do a couple things. First, I'm going to get rid of all this marabou at the very bottom and just leave the actual quill exposed. Just like this. Next, I'm going to be just grabbing onto the tip and stroking the other fibers away. If you viewed my previous video for this pattern, I actually stripped all the fibers off of one side, tied it in by the tip, and then wrapped the feather. That's how I will typically tie this pattern whenever I'm tying it for my own box. But being that I'm tying this for other guys, I know that there's lots of fishermen out there, including some of my buddies, that really like a lot of fibers on their soft hackles. Thus, whenever I send this to the swap, those guys have the option of removing some of the fibers if they fish to choose this pattern. So now I'm just prepping it. I have all those other fibers stroked back. I'm going to tie it in right at the point where I have those fibers stroked back and the tip, right where those two pieces transition. I want to make sure I get all the butt section out of there so it doesn't interfere with my eye. And I'm just going to grab onto the stem of the feather. I have a little Stonfo material clip, real easy to use. Just latches on, and now I'm set. I'm going to make no more than 2 turns around this pattern, around the hook, because I don't want to build up those feathers too much. In fact, 1 turn may be enough, but you'll see that after I make that second turn, I can actually pick some of those other fibers away. So I've made 1, I'm coming up for around my second turn. I might just start to move my thread in and out because I don't want to lash any of those fibers down too much. After I've made 2 turns with my thread, I'm just going to release that stem. Next, I'm going to grab all these fibers and stroke them back towards the bend of the hook, and then I'm going to really just get the front of the fly finished off. I want to make sure I have a clear view of my eye. So whenever I go to tie my tippet in, everything will be smooth. Get rid of some excess fibers I see. I'm going to put a half hitch just so I'm sure that I don't lose everything. Now you can see the stem. I have that stroke back, which is really perfect. So I'm just going to pull it forward, and I want to cut it as close to the thread as possible. Okay, I'm just going to give this fly a quick 360. Everything's looking good. I'm going to go straight to my whip finish. I'm only going to make this a 2-turn whip finish because I've already put a half hitch, and I'm going to use a little head cement. Oops, looks like that one got stuck in my fingernail. Okay, now I trimmed away a couple of those partridge fibers whenever I cut my thread, which is really good, but I'm going to actually take a few more away. Right now, to me, this is a heavily hackled soft hackle. That's not my style, but I do know for some tyers and fishermen, it is. Being that I'm going to be sending this away to a swap, I just want to make sure I have the approximate number. So I'm just going to stroke all those fibers forward, grab some of the longer ones, and just pull them away. I'll do this with approximately 4 or 5 fibers until it doesn't look overly hackled by my means, or by my opinion. And I'm just about getting to that point. So once I'm sure that everything is where I want it, I'm going to apply a little head cement. Prior to doing that, I want to just go back to what I was talking about regarding the thorax. You can see now, because I have that pale yellow dubbing built in there for the thorax, all these hackles kind of stem away from the body. And when they get wet, they are going to be naturally drawn towards the body, but that thorax is going to just push them away. Thus, they're going to be undulating in the current, which is going to give this just a little bit more of that insect-like movement, which is what we're really shooting for. I'm going to grab a little bit of some Vineyards head cement. I'm going to put just a drop on the end of this bodkin. And I'm just going to touch right above the eye. Just let it drip down, get absorbed into the thread. Apply just a touch of head cement to the thread the whole way around. Looks like I need just a little more in there. Less is definitely more in this case. And I'm not worried if I'm touching the eye a little bit, because the eye will get covered with a little bit of head cement. Okay. Now, if you take a peek at the eye, it is starting to get covered with some head cement. But I want to make sure that I can get my tippet through it. So I'm going to grab an old piece of hackle. I've already stripped the fibers off. I'm just going to insert that through the eye. Once I get through the eye, I'm just going to grab it by the stem, pull those fibers through. They're going to remove all that excess head cement. I might do that 2 times. Now I'm definitely able to get my tippet through there. I have all that excess head cement gone, and I'm looking at my finished soft hackle. Okay, I want to just kind of reset everything, take a moment, get all of those fibers cleaned up, get them out of the way. I just kept stroking them forward, picked out a few with just a little set of hackle pliers, and now that I have all of them looking the way that I want them, just push them back in position, and you can get a finished 360 look at this Partridge and Orange. This is a great fly to fish. I love using this in so many different situations, primarily as a dropper. I like to fish it a couple feet off the surface, and then other times I like to dress it with a little bit of floating, such as frog's fanny or some hydro, and then I like to fish it with maybe a split shot approximately 12 inches, maybe 8 inches up from this. And I really like this pattern fish just in that surface film. It's a great spot, and it's a perfect position to catch a lot of fish that are really up close feeding to the surface. With that said, I hope you enjoyed watching this fly tying tutorial. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them directly on this YouTube page, or you can email me at tcammisa@gmail.com. Thanks everybody for viewing this fly tying tutorial of the Partridge and Orange.